Hi everyone, welcome to Stereo Niche. I'm Scott Schneider. Hey, this week I've got something very rare and very special, and these are some units from Kyocera. You probably never knew they made audio. Stick around. All right, so let's talk about Kyocera. So Kyocera started out probably I think in the 50s. It manufactured ceramic bases for the television tube era, right? So back then, you had to have the ceramic bases on tubes and on all the tube electronics. Somebody had to make that, and Kyocera was a company that was heavily into that technology. So they did that and then moved into the 60s where they continued to expand. They were moved into more semiconductors and providing semiconductors to other electronics manufacturers. And then into the 70s, they decided they were going to get into building electronics. So they bought a company called Cybernetics Electronics in 1979. Well, this company was primarily into CB radios and some other kinds of electronics. They made some products for Tandy Corporation, which owns Realistic, Radio Shack brand. In the early 80s, they also I think they released the first battery-powered laptop or portable computer of the time, a Tandy 100 or something like that. So they were a very good-sized manufacturer. Well, after Kyocera bought them, Kyocera decided that they wanted to move into the high-end audio market. So they set course to design some high-end audio. As part of that, one thing that they wanted to do was incorporate some of their ceramic technology. So in all of their products, they incorporated this ceramic resin base, which is here, which from a visual perspective set them apart from everyone else. That's certainly not a feature that you would see or would have seen on any other products of the day. So that was one unique feature. It was marketed as reducing resonance throughout the product line for every single product they had. I think probably more relevant on the CD players, of course. They also had a turntable, which is exquisite. It's extremely rare. All of these units are rare, but the turntable is extremely rare. And it's a gorgeous unit. Of course, any resonance reduction you can get there would have been beneficial. Not so sure how beneficial it was for the amps and preamps, but in any case, while it might be fantastic at reducing resonance, the one downside is that it is rigid, and if it gets struck, a sort of blunt force, by anything fairly hard, it can crack. And so when you do see the up close shots, you'll see there's a crack on this preamp, as a result of that. But in any case, they manufactured these units from around, I think, 83 till around 88 was pretty much the time frame. It's not a whole lot of information out there, but from what I could tell, I think they had essentially two releases from around the early part of the 80s and then in the latter part of the 80s. And this set was part of the latter part of the 80s. This is the B910, and then this is the C910. And I do have also the tuner and the CD player. Now, these happen to come from someone who was employed by Kyocera. He was the president of Kyocera Canada, and his name's Chuck. Hi, Chuck. So I happened to get lucky enough to meet Chuck at some point and, got to buy his audio system. And I asked him, about it, and he said when he became president of the company, he saw the line and fell in love with it immediately, and then bought, all of the pieces that were available at the time. While I don't have the actual MSRPs, I can tell you that it was very pricey. These were very high-end units, and they had a price to match. This was different than, and probably opposite of the majority of the industry, though. As most of us that are collectors know, in the 70s, when we have the Silverface era, when you had metal front plate faces and you had composite material alloy knobs, there were very expensive manufacturing units of the day. But in the 1980s, it very much shifted into plastic and things. Not so with Kyocera. Everything about, the Kyocera line essentially was just overbuilt for the era. Now, it would have been, I think, more commonplace in the 70s, but they continued that sort of 1970s, I'll say, mentality of build quality into the 80s. Now, it probably is part of the reason, or a large part of the reason, that the line, didn't sell in high volumes because of the cost. And it didn't make it out of the 80s, I don't believe. I don't think they really manufactured anything after 1990. But in any case, if you find any of these units, they're gorgeous, they're very rare, and they're quite exceptional in every regard. So I'll go through, you'll get some up close shots now and see them, what they look like and how nice they look. And then I'll come back after that and we'll talk about features and specs. See you soon. All right, well, you got to see these units up close, and now you have a very good idea on how exceptional they really are. Again, I commented earlier, but in a time when most manufacturers were cutting back on the quality of materials in the 1980s, Kyocera went in the opposite direction and made some units that were, heads above everyone else for the most part, or I would say the majority of other manufacturers. But they have withstood the test of time, and they are still exceptional today. And so I think you can see that, in the close-ups, when you're viewing them up close. But now I'm going to go through these. This is the first set of separates that I've actually reviewed. Prior to this, I've done only receivers, and so for that I came up with a point system to talk about features and specs, and give you an idea of where these units fall as far as what features they offer and and the specs that they have. So I'll start this off now. One of the things I typically talk about is the years of manufacture, which I think these were somewhere around 84 to 88. MSRP, I just didn't have it. Chuck had relayed that these were very expensive, all combined. It was, $5,000, I believe, roughly, for all units. So quite expensive in their day. If anyone has MSRPs, please let me know. Post that, and I'll make a note of it in the comments too. Now, moving into the ratings. So the first thing I start off with is the power rating, and the amplifier is rated at 150 watts into 8 ohm. So for that, it gets 20 points. After that, the next criteria for power is if it can accommodate and has a spec for 4 ohms. Now, this is most separates are typically a little bit higher end than receivers. So not unusual that this certainly can accommodate 4 ohms. And at 4 ohms, it puts out 200 watts. So puts out a lot of power. So for that, it gets an additional 30 points. Moving on into phono section. For phono, it has 1 phono. A little bit unusual. Most of the receivers, or many of the receivers can handle 2. This handles 1, so it gets 10 points. But it also can accommodate an MC cartridge, which that's a little bit unusual. And not just an MC cartridge, but it has adjustments for different types. So for that, it gets an additional 20 points. So that's a little bit uncommon. So that's a nice feature. Then moving on into the number of inputs. Again, it has quite a number. It has 2 tape monitors. It has 2 auxiliary, which is a little unusual. A CD and a tuner. So you have 6 inputs in total that you can accommodate, pretty much any, analog input that you like. It does not have a one balance control. What it does have are 2 separate left and right gain controls. So you can obviously tune either side either way, and it equates into the balance. So it gets a 5 additional points for that. It has a tone defeat switch, 10 points, and then it has, for tone controls, has bass and treble tone, so it gets 5 points each. Now, I have this 20 points. I have pre-out, amp in, and that's really meant for receivers because that's a bit of a bonus feature. But here, they're already separate, so naturally they're separated, but I still had to give them those points to be even with everything else. So it gets 20 points for that. On into AC connections. Something else a little unusual for these is that the amplifier actually has AC connections as well. That's kind of, I don't think I can recall seeing that on any other amplifier. Nothing wrong with that, I just can't recall seeing it. But so combined, it has 2 switched and 3 unswitched. So that equates to 20 points and 15 points. And then lastly, 1 set of speakers. Again, a little bit unusual. I think most, even just dedicated amps, I think most of them tend to have at least 2, but it can handle 1 set of speakers, and again, it can handle 4 ohms too. So that's nice to have. In total, it was a little higher than I was expecting. I was thinking it was going to be somewhere around 210, just because I'm just taking a quick visual of how many buttons are here. It's pretty clean. It's pretty minimalist in a way. But it still equated to 230 points. I think the most I've ever rated was 250 points, I think. I should know that off the top of my head, but I don't. But I think it's 250 points. So this actually ranks, right up there with, some of the other units I've rated that have, meters and wood cases and, all those other things that get you points. But 230 points is quite exceptional for, what really, again, is a minimalist sort of spec here on the types of features. Where they did have a spec or some kind of a feature, they sort of went deep. Connections. We've got connections. Let's do 6. We're going to do phono. Let's add in MC cartridges. So really nice, very nice features that it does have. So I think that's pretty much it. Hope you guys, have enjoyed it. Oh, on the sound, I've had these for a little while now. I mentioned I got them from Chuck, and I certainly, again, appreciate, the opportunity to have gotten them from him. And I had set them up for a while. It was a few months that I had them set up, and then I needed to move some things around, and I put them back away. But I can tell you that they're just exceptional all the way around. The sort of effortless power from the amplifier and the just silence from the preamp. It's phenomenal. It really is. I did have the only thing that I did have the amplifier DC offset needed to be adjusted, but that was it. Other than that, everything was in great shape. Tuner needed a little bit of adjustment, but just talking about the preamp, everything is just exceptional, and can't say enough about the level of quality that equates into the level of sound, at the same time. So if you find these units, you're lucky. Because there's just not that many of them. I've seen more receivers than I have separates, but if you find them, and they're in good shape and they're working, get them, because you're kind of at the peak of audio technology for the 80s, if you can find a set of these. Let me know in the comments if you have any experience with them. Would love some feedback. If you want to keep up with future videos, hit that subscribe button. And as always, thank you guys for tuning in.